I'm Stacy Johnson Cosby, longtime realtor and real estate investor here in Kansas City, Missouri. I also lead two housing alliances. First is the KC Regional Housing Alliance here in the Midwest, and the other is the National Housing Provider Coalition. We are the voice of rental housing providers, not only in our area, but in our country. Number one goal is to protect and preserve private property rights. And number two, protect our investments. Number three, to make sure that there is available housing for all of our customers and clients. Right now, the most punitive source of income law in the country is being proposed right here in Kansas City. The target's on our back. Our goal is to fight this and to identify across the country the other laws that are coming that we're going to need to engage in. We must protect housing as an industry for those who need housing and for those of us who have built our family businesses around providing housing to our neighbors in our communities. So yes, we know that this would force people, landlords, to put people into their properties that we otherwise would not through our normal screening processes. For example, the ordinance says that we cannot discriminate against someone who has a violent criminal or arrest history. And so we would be forced to allow into our buildings a child predator or someone with a violent felony history into an apartment building with other unsuspecting renters, or into a neighborhood on a block where people are just trying to enjoy their properties. If you say no to the person that are in these protected classes, then you open yourself up for a discrimination complaint. And we also know that we can't discriminate against someone who hasn't paid their previous landlord with an eviction. We can't discriminate against someone who has prior property damage, or someone who has a poor credit score or poor credit history. The person who will end up suffering is the person who's done everything the right way with the good credit and the job history, because we'll have to say no to them in favor of the protected class. And so we know that the majority of the housing in our city of Kansas City is provided by the small to medium independent housing providers. And this ordinance is punitive in its nature because the socialists who put it in place have a goal of disincentivizing real estate investors. And this will do it. It will cause us to go underground and try to find ways to work around the ordinance that are legal, or it will force us to leave the market, because most of us do not want to take the chance with our investment in our family business of being charged with a crime or going out of business. And with this particular ordinance, you'll be charged with violating the law that could end up with penalties, excessive penalties that go back, by the way, to tenant groups, and also could incur jail time. And it could cause the revocation of our permit and ability to do business in the city. And we may end up having to house people for free while they go through this process. It is anti-small business, it's anti-housing in a city that has a housing problem. They won't work with us. Instead, we find the city council working against us. We're wondering why they've singled out housing providers, those of us with small local businesses. We know that they would not do this to a bank or a car lender or anyone else. Why do they pick us to single out, to tell us how to run our business and how to screen our potential clients? And keeping in mind, we are creditors. We're trusting that when we put someone in a property that they're going to be there and pay their bills for 12 months. And of course, we need to look at payment history and all of those other things. They wouldn't dare do this to any other creditor, and yet they've targeted us. And what the city council may not know is that the organization, the socialist activist tenant organization behind it, is looking for a way to disrupt housing. But what's going to happen, the unintended consequence, is that there will be fewer of us in the marketplace, and we'll sell to the big institutional or out-of-town investors, because they pay a premium, by the way. So we'll be more tempted to sell to them and exit the market. And that means that the inventory for those who need housing will be lower because we'll be gone. And naturally, the prices will go up. And so we need them to work with housing providers to create housing policy, and not a socialist organization that has not created a single housing unit ever. We should be the ones at the table working with them, and instead they work against us.
Welcome to the Millionaire Mentorship Podcast. We talk all things real estate, business, entrepreneurship. Today, I've got a group of Kansas City landlords, myself included, and we're talking about the local ordinance that is being proposed by KC Tenants, and we hope that the council takes this video and listens to it about our opinions about local landlords in Kansas City and about what our thoughts are about this ordinance. You guys are landlords in Kansas City. Where are you from, Harold?
I'm born and raised right here in Kansas City, but my parents have Texas roots. And I've been a community advocate for over 30 years. I had a youth program called the Kansas City Keys, had boys and girls involved. I've been a great supporter of Kansas City citizens. I had over 300 kids got scholarships. I've been national champs with my kids. I had coached boys basketball, girls basketball. We supported the education system here. And it was all as a volunteer. Our organization at one time was just very tremendous. We had all sports covered and, again, mentoring, supporting the schools. We're involved with our family life. We got other jobs. And then this thing to invest in property in our own community is a big thing. But it takes our time. And we have to, screen tenants. We have to be involved with our tenants.
Right.
We don't have choice. We do take Section 8. So it's always been something that has been a tool to help us gravitate to do business as a landlord.
They came up with something. Let's go back and say, hey, okay, fine. We'll rent to anybody, which we don't care about that.
Yes.
But the whole criminal thing, what do you feel about that? Would you want to rent to somebody who has a history of repeat offending, that's a violent criminal? Do you want to rent to that person?
I say this, and one of the things that's probably unique about being a black landlord is a lot of times in our world, it's relationships. So if you know somebody and somebody's family and things like that, and you kind of knew the story behind some of that, maybe you have an understanding of the perspective of the person that you're taking in. So obviously these people are staying places and have been tenants in some of these places. And so I just can't just say no. Right. I just don't want to be mandated to have to do something. First of all, this is my property. This is something I decided to do. Whether I want to keep it on the side and hold it as an investment and flip it, or if I decide to rent it, I don't want somebody else trying to say they got to make a decision on how I execute that. I mean, there's none of their money involved. Are they going to start giving us money so then now we can make those decisions? Then that becomes, then now you got a power play. You don't have any investment involved, you don't have a power play.
I agree with you 100%. Do you know what a deed restriction is?
To a degree, yeah.
A deed restriction is that limits your ability what you can do with a certain property. Like if you had a deed restriction on this property and it said that you could only use this to be like, it only could be multifamily or it only could be single family, it's in the deed.
Yes.
Or it has to be an HOA. When they do what they're doing, they're essentially putting a deed restriction on our property. They're forcing rent control is the other thing.
Yes.
So why do you think that they're trying to do this?
Good and bad, right? So it could be good for those that need affordable housing.
Right.
So we have folks in our neighborhoods that need affordable housing. They need nice places to stay. I purposely have divested all of my 401k money back in my own neighborhood. I have maybe one or two properties I've ever done a flip in outside of Kansas City. And then if anybody tells you anything about my property, it's going to be where I can live in it. I'm going to make it nice enough. It's going to be livable for me. So I'm not that other landlord, that just wants to bare-base anything. I want it to be nice. And so that's my neighborhood. So I've invested what I've had work for all my life back in my own neighborhood. Who does that?
Well, I mean, that's the same thing here. And I didn't do it in my own neighborhood, but I grew up broke.
Yes.
In Seattle, Washington. I never had anything. So when they put like rich landlords, we're just regular people. Some of us doing better than others, some of us not. But I'm sure that you worked hard for that 401k.
Yes.
And when somebody tells you what you got to do, how does it make you feel?
It feels like you're powerless. I mean, now, here's the other thing is why do you have the opportunity or the ability to be able to tell me what to do and dictate with my money that I worked for 30 plus years? I mean, the American way is bootstraps. You come up, you work hard. Hey, and sometimes some people go take their money and they go entertain it all. I sacrifice some of my entertainment so I could put it back into things that I could see to have a longevity, which is these properties. And so I'm not rich by any means by it, and I'm still gravitating to grow it, but I'm also wanting it for my lifestyle. I like it for my child's lifestyle. I like to have something to pass on. So in wealth transference. And that's the American way. So now you're trying to change the whole structure of how, they're saying you were to come up. You're coming up by your own bootstraps if you're working for it and nobody's giving you anything.
LD, do you know much about KC Tenants?
Not a lot, just most of what I've seen on the news and in some of the meetings, they seem to be so radicalized, like there's just no reasoning with them, and that's the sad part about it all, because with this, it seems like we should be able to sit down at the table and come up with something that's, comparable for both parties, but with them, it's just like, hey, our way or the highway, There's just no reasoning with them at all. So
How does it make you feel, LD, when you see them say you're discriminating as somebody who probably at one point in time, I'm just throwing it out there, has been discriminated against?
it's sad. I mean, it's frustrating as well because there's tenants to this day that, for example, there was a homeless guy that I met years ago, and he had a really good story about how he became homeless. And we took him in and we put him into a property for about 6 or 7 months, helping find employment and everything. And now he's trying to buy him a house. Right. And then for a while he did get on Section 8, but he got off after he got gainfully employed. But a lot of times with Section 8 people, and I'm not saying this is the case all the time, but I see it time and time and time. They come into a property with a job, and then they're paying so much rent a month themselves, and then after anywhere between 3 and 9 months, they're not employed anymore, and now Section 8 is paying 100% of everything. And so to say that you should discriminate against them, I think is unfair.
Totally unfair. And that's exactly how it feels. It's like they've labeled us as greedy landlords, but the reality is we're housing providers.
I've said this from the beginning that I got involved, and I wish this was possible. If we could just halt it for a second,
Right.
and have a collective town hall meeting to have a fair discussion on how to arrive to some compromises.
Well, let's all ask them right now. Dear City Council, would you please let us all sit at the table and come up with a solution that gives you guys affordable housing, that helps people who need to get housing, that doesn't stranglehold people who have worked hard, like Harold, Carletta, and LD, and Troy Kearns, to build their portfolio or their rental property or properties to provide housing for other people, and then some other political organization is going to come in and muscle the city council and force them to pass a law. And I've seen this happen in Las Vegas, where I spent the last 15 years. They come in, they make an agenda, and all of a sudden we have to, and then it never comes off the books.
We need to table this thing. They need to kill it this January 25th when they have this meeting, and they need to allow us to have a voice in the impact of this ordinance and have a fair ordinance at the end of the day, because what they're going to create is more problems for the city if they allow this thing to pass.
Here's the other thing. How do they verify it? How do they enforce it?
Well, we already know Healthy Homes is struggling. So,
But how do they enforce it?
Essentially, it's going to cost the city more money.
the problem though is for the landlord, because now we got to defend ourselves.
Yeah.
Right.
It's costing us more
Right.
money. These are people that
But they
never
get free legal representation.
and you got to pay for it. And so, hey, city, we're asking that you pay for ours too, especially a small landlord. I can't afford additional costs to come down on me, especially when I'm a decent tenant, a decent landlord here.
Well,
yeah,
here's
you're
the
right
thing that
about
bothered me the most. Okay, especially if you go back to the COVID area, where they wouldn't allow you to evict anybody. Right. So people, that finally rolled around, and say, for example, you had 20 properties and you had 12 people that wasn't paying. Not all those people probably got that money, whereas they paid their rent and kind of gave the landlord some relief. So for a while, a landlord wasn't getting any money. And then they came out with these funds that made it available to some landlords. But still, a lot of tenants weren't even filing to get that money or whatnot. So all of a sudden the evictions come around and boom, you get 8 or 9 tenants that's put out, but yet you still haven't gotten that money. But now you got these properties that need to be rehabbed, but all your resources have been ate up during the process of when they wouldn't allow you to evict nobody, and you paying, your mortgage or whatever. But now you got, okay, all these properties available. Now you got to go try to get a loan to get those rehab, to do them yourself, and then you still have the material. You got the material costs and stuff like that, even if you're doing them yourself. And then now you get hit with this other ordinance they put in place where they're paying these guys, and so now you're trying to get the other residuals out that didn't get put out. And it's just costing you monies after monies after monies. But the thing I'm getting at too is now, where does it stop? That's what I'm afraid of now, because they keep coming back to the table. How come we can't just all sit down, come up with something that's feasible for both sides and be done with this? And as I've asked some of the council members, where are you going to tell KC Tenants enough is enough? You know, where does it stop with them? Because they're just going to keep knocking on the door saying, okay, now we want this, now we want that. Okay, you did this for us, now we need you to do that. And it just keeps seeming like this is something that's going to be a never-ending process. So why not sit down and say, okay, let's come up with something so we don't have to keep coming back to the table.
I'm scared. That's
Yeah.
how it makes me feel. I feel like
Powerless is more better word.
powerless, and I say scared because I'm like in handcuffs.
Yeah.
In hope that you consider me at some point. You leave me something to have some type of something to work with, something to
Well,
live
and you
to
shouldn't
make us
feel like
feel
that when
alive.
it's your property.
You shouldn't feel
you're
like
the
that.
ownership of that property, and you telling me, okay.
Yeah, you dictate.
Beyond the property, I'm talking about my livelihood.
Yeah.
You know, I'm talking about.
Well, that property is your livelihood.
That's what I'm
Part
saying.
of it,
So it's a part of you. It's your business. It's a part of your work. It's a part of your humanization of how you do contribute to the greater good of society. KC Tenants, we hear you. We like you. But we got to do this. We got to take a step back because we don't want to have to come back and deal with this twice.
Yeah.
So we see an opportunity to address some issues. And thanks for bringing this to our attention. We didn't know that this was this horrible out here.
Right.
But it's a better way that we can do this. So give us a moment. And we're gonna, you may not agree with everything that we come up with, but I guarantee you and I promise you, we're gonna be fair. And that's all I can give you as counsel is we're gonna be fair. We have to now back up and we need to have some conversations. And we need time to fairly give the right people on both sides of the coin to be heard. Because it's tenants that don't know, for one. Second, don't understand entirely what's happening. When it happens, they're gonna be like, well, when did this happen?
If you are, on behalf of KC Tenants, or if you are pro what they're saying, once you take somebody else's rights away, you yourself have now said it's okay to take my rights away. When you started off, you were so proud of the fact that you worked so hard, you put all your 401k money in, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished growing up as a poor guy, and I'm sure you're proud of what you've accomplished. Like, somebody else is making the decisions for what you can do with your property now.
Yeah.
Well, the other side to me in this too is the causal and effect side of everything. And then you have, okay, if they're saying no one wants to rent to women with kids, they're not attacking the root of the issue to me. Why? And that's the part, that I always look at in any situation. Why does this happen, and how do we correct that? Not through force, but through saying, when, like, for example, let's just use celebrities, and they take a black eye. Then they try to spin it to their advantage where, okay, well, you don't like the celebrity. Now you like the celebrity. So flip it to where now everybody wants to rent to African-American women with children versus, well, I don't want to rent to them for whatever reason.
So make an incentive.
Yeah, and
And
even give KC Tenants an incentive. Hey, we got all these houses. Hey, why don't y'all take over some of them? Why don't y'all bring them up? You've got a core of folks that you would like to see have livable standards.
Yeah, let's get
Why
them.
why don't you take some of these off the city's books and you go fix them up?
Or why don't
Hey,
the
why,
city
let
develop?
that, I mean, you've got the idea on your perspective on what they need, so you would be a great landlord for that group.
Yeah.
But don't incorporate all of Kansas City, which is over 500 and some odd thousand folks, with your particular audience.
When you're doing what you're supposed to do and you've done what you're supposed to do to rightfully be where you're at, to take that away from me and make me feel like you don't earn this.
Yeah.
You don't deserve this. It does not freaking feel good.
That's clipping your
and
wings.
It makes it, now I'm at a standstill to say I'm not a quitter. I'm not easily pushed away or run from a fight. Let me take a step back, watch how this play out, and see methodically how I got to play the game different. That means maybe looking at other markets to invest in. One thing I do want to add is this.
Add it.
Council, consider a cap on how many properties you should have, landlord incentive, and representation for the landlords. since KC Tenants is having, they're providing representation for them in these legal situations.
Yeah.
I think it's fair for us to have some type of representation provided by the city so it can help cut our costs.
Yeah.
I also advocate that they have to go through some type of tenant education
Right.
on how to
Ooh, I like that.
maintain and take care of properties,
Air filters, changing batteries.
keeping the grass cut.
Yeah.
And if our
Roaches.
leases, right, if our leases state that they're required to do these things, they can get fined. If we can provide verification that that's in our lease, then there should be a fine that we can go after and say, hey, they didn't do this and I'm struggling with that. Make the playing field even.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm asking for and advocate. That way we're not too far away from the solution
Yeah.
that we have to come back and have these draining struggle conversations repeatedly, because it's not going to stop. They're not going to stop. And now we have to continue to be prepared to advocate, put ourselves in position to fight back. And we shouldn't have to fight each other. We should have to have a compromise.
Make sure that you vote and show up and email council how you feel, which way, one or the other, and we'll check in the next one. Anything else to add, Harold?
January 25th is when they're going into council to a vote on that, which is this Thursday. And if you support us, come out to support the landlords at that hearing this January 25th at 2:30.
Housing providers, support us. Peace.